Hey, everybody. Welcome to Watches with Dennis. And I'm doing an atypical weekday stream, which I have done on occasion, but don't do it very often, especially when I don't have a panel. But I've been off work for, well, today, and actually I'm going to be off until the new year. So I decided it would be a good opportunity to go ahead and have a conversation with those of you who might be available for one. And if not, well, you can always check out the recording. And so today, I decided that what I wanted to go ahead and do is discuss what I think are the best watches of 2024. Got this idea from Monochrome, which has been putting out best of line. They have some really good picks, I would say, overall. But anyway, I thought, I'd do my own grab of what ones because they have whole sets. And so basically, what we're going to do is we will go over what I think was the best release in 2024 for a dress watch, chronograph, GMT, pilot's watch, which you could consider a pilot's watch a GMT as well, especially in this instance, because I'm going to give you two GMTs essentially. Dive watch, we got to do dive watch, of course, and integrated sports bracelet watch. So I have quite a mix of hopefully fun topics. And of course, those of you who are able to participate live, if you want to say what you think are your favorite picks in 2024 by category or just overall, whatever works for you, I would be interested in seeing that. And likewise, if you are watching the recording, you can always just leave a comment and say which ones of those are your preferred ones. I haven't had any videos out since the last live stream, not too surprising. And I will still plan on a live stream on Saturday US time. And I actually already have that one made in terms of like, if you want to be alerted, I've got it set up already. And that's going to be, I'm going to focus on 3 blunders of 2024, watch brands that made a blunder. And I probably should have done more than 3, but I decided to go ahead and limit it because I think a couple of them are going to be pretty big discussion points. On the wrist today is the Seiko 5 SRPK 17. This is that 55th anniversary reissue from last year. I'll probably get the review out almost assuredly within the next week. In fact, it might be done tomorrow. I actually finished writing the script today. I just haven't recorded it. And Captain Spaulding Entertainment, welcome to the live stream. I am not usually on at this time, so I don't expect to have very many people. But nonetheless, I figured, hey, content is content. And if anyone was bored or traveling back from visiting family from Christmas or whatever, you'll give them the opportunity to have something to consume at some stage. So without further ado, let's go ahead and let's get started. I'm actually going to start with dress watch first because I think it's the least interesting to most people, though it tends to be the most interesting to me. And it's a brand I've never really considered seriously purchasing, and that would be Moritz Grossman. So here, and I have links to all of the articles I'm going to cite today in the show notes already, so you can go and check those out at your leisure. But this is the 37 Arabic Vintage. It has a lot of things going for it that I think are pretty appealing from a dress watch standard. 37, is a reference to the sizing of the watch, 37 millimeters, which is one of my. I generally like my dress watches in the 37 to 39 millimeter range. So this is very ideal for me personally. Of course, these are my picks. German watch design is one of my favorites when it comes to dress watches, especially if we steer clear of Bauhaus. But in this instance, it's kind of interesting because this feels very Swiss to me, very pocket watch in terms of you've got these very large Breguet style numerals. You do not have a Breguet handset. However, you've got, I'm not even sure what to call these, maybe Lance handsets. Small seconds at the 6, which I like. Key feature, which would have killed it for me, and this would not have been a pick if they had cropped into the hour numerals. When you have Arabic or Roman hour numerals, I expect subdials to not crop them. A lot of pocket watches did crop them, though. So a lot of times when you go with a vintage aesthetic, you will see the cropping. But Moritz Grossman resisted the urge to destroy that 7 and 5 with that small seconds, and it just almost kisses the edge. There's actually some white space there. All the way to the tremblage that they used for the frosted style dial that they've got. I don't think the movement itself you can look at. They use an in-house caliber, but again, 3/4 plate, pretty standard German stuff. So there's not a whole lot to see there, though you do have some engravings on the balance cock, which if you're familiar with Glashütte Original or a Langenzone, this is another German motif that's often quite appreciated. They actually have a little bit more. They've actually done another bridge with some freehand engraving, it looks like. So anyway, in terms of dress watches, I didn't mean to share it. I've already shared it in the video. in the video description. But nonetheless, just in terms of all the dress watches I've seen this year, this would be the one that I would pick that I think was the best of a new release. It's a little tricky because dress watches a lot of times are relatively iterative. You might see a different colorway. A lot of times you would see, I think the good case in point would be from Watches and Wonders, Nomos Glashütte. So speaking of another German brand, I believe that was where they turned out 30 plus some flavors, like Baskin Robbins up in that watchmaker. And they just came out with a whole slew of colorways for one of their watch designs, which as a design could be taken as a dress watch. However, I feel that a lot of those colorways are not really appropriate for a dress watch situation. So I would almost rule them out by default in most instances. My opinion, dress watches need to have fairly conservative colorways. Otherwise, they are no longer really a dress watch. They're a fun watch or a fashion watch or something, because they're not really suited for dress attire. Would be my argument. But for most people, it doesn't really matter one way or the other. Dress watch collecting, I think, is one of the least popular forms at this stage. I know I'm an exception in the sense that I prefer dress watches to other watch types, but I know most people prefer sports watches. So that's what we're going to jump into next. Is we're going to hit all of the sports watch categories. And so the next item is going to be chronograph. Now, I was just speaking about with Maurice Grotzman the issue of chronographs and the cropping with subdials of hour markers, if they're Arabic or if they're Roman. I don't mind if it's a baton, if you want to do a little stubby baton or whatnot. But this sort of cropping happens in two scenarios predominantly. One is that pocket watch vibe. So you see it in dress watches a lot. Where you'll have like the small seconds cut in. A. Lange and Söhne does this constantly with their Saxonias, for example. And so I just rule them out. Like I won't consider them outright. But with chronographs, that's dialed to 11 because chronograph cropping is exceedingly common because you need to accommodate 2 or 3 subdials in almost all chronograph configurations. We have seen other chronographs that don't necessarily do that, but the tri-register setup is the most popular at this point, and dual registers for an even more vintagey look, but I'd say the tri-registers are generally more appreciated. And in general, I more gravitate towards those. Now, I'm doing chronograph second because I'm doing the extremes here. So dress watch is my favorite, but I know for a lot of people it isn't theirs. Chronograph's one of my least favorite. I own one chronograph watch. I have basically no desire at this point to pick up another one. I like the look. I like the aesthetic. I don't like the maintenance. I don't like how finicky they often are. I don't like how thick they tend to be. All that said, I still can appreciate them from a design standpoint. And so looking at all the ones that came out this year, I don't know if this one will be controversial or not. I'm going to say a little bit, and that is I'm actually going to go ahead and pick the Omega Speedmaster, first Omega in space. Now, longtime viewers of this channel know that I am not a fan of the professional moon watches. Just aesthetically, like I don't have a gripe with their movement. I don't have a gripe with them visually in any particular way. It simply comes down to the fact that I do not find the watch interesting, aside from the story about all the space stuff. But there's so many space stories that I've heard over the years. It's not strong enough to pull me in. Same here, that this was, based off of, it's not the professional line. This is the, first Omega in space. It's not the moon watch, but nonetheless, there's a lot that they did to this line, or I should say that they had before they made the moon watches, that I actually prefer, from the handset that's involved, the subdials, the Fotina that they used here. And I understand Fotina can be fairly controversial. Omega does a pretty good job with it. I think the No Time to Die watch was a good case in point where that aged look was clearly not going to make the watch look vintage. They weren't going for that with the No Time to Die. They were doing it because it matched with the colorway that they were doing with the dial and the titanium of the watch. I think the same thing is in play here with this very, very deep kind of midnight blue going on. I think that they've got well-balanced sub-registers for the chronograph features. And so there are a few things I don't love about this, but looking at all the major chronograph releases for the year, this was the one that I still felt was the nicest. And I almost said the most unique, but I have to hedge a little bit on that because obviously this is basically a re-edition. I know a lot of people were upset because of the parallels to the Ed White, and seeing this come out was something of an affront to those that had bought that or were on the list for that, and they really questioned their decision making. But setting aside the business sense of like, did Omega wrong people by coming out with this version so much more affordable than the Ed White or whatnot? Just based off the watch itself, it's a nice looking watch. Just everything about it, basically, I think is better than the Moonwatch. So for me, this was a very easy pick in terms of chronographs. Again, a lot of the other chronographs that came out violated some of my core rules that I have regarding things like the cropping of they'll put in Arabic numerals and they'll have the subdials cut right into them. And it's deeply, deeply unattractive to me. Well loomed watch as well. Again, not one that I would end up buying. Maybe some people didn't like that they close case backed it. I don't care. It's just one of those things where if you're really drawn to Omega, I would say most people are going to want the Moonwatch because it's the Moonwatch. But I think this is just a better looking chronograph. Now, Omega has some other chronographs that I might even be drawn to more, but they did not come out in 2024. Thus, I cannot include them in this list because this is my best of 2024 list. But anyway, so the first Omega in space is what I'm going with for my pick for chronograph. Let's see. Escapement Show. Thomas, hello. Hope everyone had a great Christmas and happy Hanukkah to those that celebrate. Welcome to the live stream. I do not normally do this time period, but I figured I wanted to do something before I went to sleep because I have some time off, and I figured let's turn something out. Captain Spaulding says, I prefer dress watches compared to other styles. Okay, well, we are two people in the same boat then. So we've already done two now. We've done Maurice Grotzman's for the dress watch. We did that, the 37 Arabic Vintage. Very, very nice, reminiscent of a pocket watch. We can always pop it back up again later if we need to. And then, of course, first Omega in space for chronograph. So now GMT. Now I'm separating GMT and Pilot, but I'm cheating a little bit, but it's my channel, so I get to. So for GMT, again, talking a little bit about where these watches live with me. I have one GMT watch. It was my first luxury watch. It was my Rolex Explorer 2. I have a 16570. I still have it. And I've owned it about 18 years at this point. So I got it well before I was into collecting watches. And because it's a GMT watch, I have never seriously entertained getting another GMT. It's not been anything I've been concerned with. So I'm not looking to buy another GMT watch because I have one and I don't travel enough to really feel like I need more. Now, of course, some people might just like the complication because it's a cool complication, and that's great. So because of that, I want to go ahead and pick one that I think a lot of people are going to find very appealing if they were interested in something on the luxury side, but approachable, but checks all the boxes. And I think because of that, as boring of a pick in a way as it is, I have to go with a Tudor Black Bay 58 GMT. So it has so much going for it that I feel in a way almost how could I not? But you'll find out when I do my Pilot watches that I'm cheating a little bit because I've got a backup. Basically, I have a backup. So I mean, we've got the Coke bezel that everyone wanted and thought Rolex was going to turn out, that they were going to shut down the Pepsis and they were going to put out the Coke bezel. Well, there's no Coke bezel. Here we are with a Coke style bezel out of Tudor, however. Gilt numbers, the dial and the gilt looks good. I had a Black Bay non-58. I had a Black Bay bronze with the black dial and the gilt looks really good on black. So I understand like the gilting here around the handset, the gilting here around the various indices and such, but I still think that stark white would have looked a lot better around the bezel. But nonetheless, it is a Coke bezel. Don't worry. I'm sure in 4 or 5 years, Tudor's going to go ahead and do an all white one, and everyone's going to say it's the greatest release ever, just like they do with everything that happens out of Tudor. However, the reason why this is so noteworthy is, one, the Black Bay line, it's a really nice watch. It's very robust. They've worked the kinks out of the in-house movements, and this meant that they finally got the thing down smaller. And that's been a struggle for the GMT line. The original, they've had the GMT in the Black Bay non-58 for a while now, but it was running, I think, about 15 millimeters thick. The Tudor Black Bay Pro, which looks a lot like the Explorer 2, was a little under that. I think it was around 14.7, 14.8, somewhere in there, millimeters in terms of, so basically the same thickness. So they're all thick, unless you had a big wrist. you might not be comfortable with that level of thickness out of a GMT watch. So the GMT going into the 58 has solved a lot of problems. Now, thickness is one piece of it, but this got it under 13 millimeters thick. So 12.8 millimeters. And as a case in point, you're not going to have any perspective here because of these, this is just a little crappy webcam that I'm using right now. But so my SRPK 17 that I'm wearing, this is 12.5. So this is I guess a scale. This is a 12.5 millimeter watch thickness. So the GMT in the 58 is only 0.2 millimeters thicker than the Seiko is. Now, yes, this is thinner than a lot of Seiko 5s, but I mean, 12.5 is not a small watch. So in terms of thickness, so down to 12.8 millimeters in thickness. So that's great. Again, 39 millimeter diameter though. So very, very modest wearing watch overall. A lot of wrist sizes that are not large wrist sizes are going to appreciate that. So those are the key things that made it such a good release. So we're talking a 47 millimeter lug to lug, 39 millimeter diameter watch, 12.8 millimeters thick. It's basically made a GMT watch that's accessible to medium-sized wrists. And it was in the colorway that everyone wanted out of Rolex. So we didn't get the Rolex colorway that we wanted. Tudor has given it to us. It's a lot more affordable. You can easily get a hold of them. So all of these things together result in this watch being my GMT pick for 2024. Joe, welcome to the live stream, Joe. Better than the Rolex Bruce Wayne. Better. Well, all right, here's the thing. All right, first of all, I don't ever call it the Bruce Wayne. Well, or is that the new shade you mean? Because I knew there was someone who was like calling the Batgirls the Bruce Wayne, and I think because they didn't like calling it Batgirl, or I don't know. I saw it on some channel this was about more, but the Batman and the whole difference there was just the bracelet. Like the Batman was the oyster and the Batgirl was the Jubilee. So I'm assuming, is the Rolex Bruce Wayne the new super muted colorway that they came out, like their new GMT watch? If that's it, then yes, the Tudor's better. I mean, for 2024, I'm going to put it as the better pick. And the reason why is, as cool as, and I liked that new colorway. I didn't know it was called the Bruce Wayne. I don't know all the nicknames, so I apologize. But that new colorway I like because it's a very conservative colorway, and I have a very conservative aesthetic when it comes to watches in general. That said, that ain't the colorway that everyone wants. They want Pepsis or they want Cokes. That's what they want. They didn't want that colorway. No one asked for that colorway. And in fact, Cokes and Pepsis are more popular than the Batman is too. So, or I'm going to say they're more popular. So maybe that's not true, but I see more demand. There's always talk about the red and black and the red and blue. So yes, Joe, okay. So thank you. And I see you've clarified for me that it is. Okay. So that's the nickname for the gray and black is the Bruce Wayne. All right. Well, I'll go with whatever nickname you want, but no, while it might more appeal to what I would buy, I still think this is a better release because I don't know the whole point of Tudor, but I'm going to say the whole point of Tudor, I think from the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation's perspective, is to get people into the brand line and not necessarily to move them on up into Rolexes, but rather they can scratch itches with Tudor that they will not scratch with Rolex. So it's completely conceivable to me that in my lifetime, Rolex never comes out with a Coke bezel again, that they might just not do it. So when you know that, but they know that demand exists. They know there are a lot of people when they see the used market on vintage Rolex Cokes. And so they let Tudor come out and put out the colorway that everyone really wanted. And it's no secret. Everyone knows that they want that red. They want red and black now. And they wanted more Pepsis. Remember, the Pepsi production seemed to go slow and people were getting all concerned about that. They want more Pepsis. They didn't want a gray combo with black. So, in fact, while I like that colorway a lot, between it and the Tudor, I don't know, because part of the whole point of the GMT, I think, is to have a bright color representing the daytime hours and the nighttime being represented by a dark color, and gray and black doesn't really achieve that for me. But it is a nice looking watch. So anyway, that's just my take, but I'd love to hear other thoughts on it. Speaking of other thoughts, I told you I was cheating a little bit with my GMT. So we've done, and for a recap, I see more people have joined in. So welcome to the live stream, by the way. We're just talking about my picks for best watches of 2024, best releases, I should probably have clarified in the title. But for my dress watch pick, I've done this one. It's Maurice Grossman 37 millimeter Arabic vintage watch. For chronograph, I went with the anniversary series First Omega in Space from Omega. And we just got done talking about the Tudor Black Bay 58 GMT for my GMT pick. My pick for pilot watch is also a GMT, but it's a Longines. So the Longines Spirit Zulu Time 39. What was different? They made it in titanium. One of the things that I have as an issue, broadly speaking, but it doesn't apply to the entire catalog. In fact, it maybe only applies to a minority of the catalog, is my concern with the size of Longines watches. We just talked about thickness and how important it was for Tudor to have gotten the 58 down to the size that they did because it made it much more wearable. Longines has a tendency, because they use a lot of modules to achieve all of their complications on their watches, to make their watches very, very thick. And that thickness often comes along with a weight that people do not want. So the watches end up either too thick for people, too heavy for people, or too both for people. But not this watch. For a variety of reasons. So one, it's in titanium. So now it's very, very light. And if you've never handled a titanium watch, I highly recommend you do. You don't have to go to this, find this. Go check out a Citizen. Citizen, super titanium. You handle one titanium watch, you're going to have a sense about all of them in terms of the weight in general. Again, I picked this as a pilot watch, not because of the GMT complication, which is fair enough. I mean, for me, pilot watches generally fall into 3 buckets to count as a pilot watch. Because a pilot watch, in a way, in one of those buckets, it's just a aviation field watch. It's still like, it's supposed to be like a military-esque thing. Fliegers are like this. So high legibility is often one sign of a pilot watch. Second is something that's very functional for pilots to be able to calculate things in flight. So the Breitling Navitimer, the Zen equivalent, those examples with like the slide rules and stuff, that's your second bucket. And then your third bucket is things that are useful to a pilot because they travel a lot. And GMT complications meet that. So the whole Pan Am history with the Rolex GMT Master is why that's a pilot watch. Those are the 3 main buckets of a pilot watch. Are there other buckets? Oris would probably argue the Pro Pilot X, but I don't think it meets the legibility criteria, and it doesn't have anything else going for it. In that instance, they made it look kind of like an airplane in the sense that the bezel is sort of, it looks like a turbine. The bracelet has it looks like a seatbelt on an airplane. So they like literally made it look like an airplane. I think that's kind of a stupid I owned one. Don't get me wrong. It was a nice watch, but I think it's kind of a stupid thing to use to call it a pilot watch. But anyway, I'm picking this because of its legibility. The problem with the Tudor Black Bay 58 is I look at this dial and I still think dive watch. A nice dive watch, but it's not designed to quickly let you tell. I mean, it's got large market. I mean, we understand how clocks work. We're into watches. So it's not hard for us to say that this is 10:10 on the watch. However, for a pilot watch, very distinct things like Arabic numerals, lots of them, not just a few of them. These are elements that help stand out. You can think of the Air King from Rolex, where they're mixing the minute track and the hour track, but it's all very easy to read. That's why I picked this, is because it's very easy to read. I could have, if it was not a requirement of me to use a 2024 watch, just as easily given you one that didn't have the GMT complication. I still have run with this, but the GMT complication pushes it up a notch. But this is not my best GMT pick of 2024. It's my best pilot pick of 2024. It happens to also have a GMT. So if you wanted another idea, that could also be another idea for for a GMT watch. These two are somewhat interchangeable, but I put them in different buckets. So again, it's got very distinct red GMT hand for that aspect, but very, very legible dial, reasonable size at 39 millimeters. The bezel itself is easy to read as well. So overall, this is one that really stood out to me. And the stats themselves, I think, are noteworthy. So this does have 100 meters of water resistance. A lot of times you might not suspect that a pilot watch will. Usually, if they're not a chronograph, you'll get some decent water resistance out of them, but it does depend. It's grade 5 titanium, not grade 2. Does it matter? It matters in the sense of polishing. So they're able to do a lot more finishing to grade 5 titanium because it's actually an alloy, and grade 2 titanium is more of a, basically, impurities aside, it's pure titanium. Some people will try and articulate that grade 5 titanium is, I'm going to use my air quotes, better than grade 2. I don't think that's actually true. It's more of a stylistic choice. I will say, amongst watch collectors, broadly speaking, there is a preference for grade 5 when certain price points have entered the chat, so to speak. So given all of that, note it's grade 5, so they are able to polish it up. Sizing, so I said it was 39 millimeters in diameter, but this is 13.2 millimeters thick. That's a little bit thicker. It's about half a millimeter thicker than the Tudor GMT we talked about. So you are getting a thicker watch. That's not unusual with Longines because of their module approach that they have to take. However, this is only 46.7 millimeters lug to lug. So while this is a 39, what's the lug to lug on this one? I don't remember anymore. 47, about the same. So this one might be slightly smaller wearing across the wrist. But anyway, and this has the date window at the 6 o'clock, which again, with the GMT watch, you do not get on the Tudor a date, which oh no, you do. Good. I was like, why would you not get the date on a GMT watch? I was like, it's usually kind of important because you need to know which because it's based on the time zone. Anyway, all right. Bidirectional ceramic insert bezel, which these are aluminum. So okay, so I'd argue that's an advantage for Longines. And so anyway, I just think I really like the Zulu Times a lot. This was a new one that they came out with in 2024. I'm scrolling down because I was hoping to tell you how much it weighs. I don't normally pay that much attention to weight on a watch, but it's under $5,000. And you do get grade 5 titanium, which I don't even think Tudor does anything in grade 5. So if you want some polished titanium, this is definitely one that's worth considering. And I do not see the weight. But anyway, as a pilot watch goes, it met all of my boxes, and I think it looks really good. So this is the one I had picked for my 2024 best pilot watch of the year. All right. Let me catch up with the chat. I see some people have popped in. Riskful Ignorance, good evening. Welcome to my late night live stream. Well, depending on where you live, late night. Richard, welcome to the live stream to you as well. Do you own or have an opinion on a Bulova Lunar Pilot meteorite? I do not own any Bulovas. A friend of mine has a Bulova, but not the Lunar Pilot. He has the hack. So I'm going to have to just pull it up because I do not know. I know I've seen them before, but it's not readily coming to my mind. Generally speaking, I do not like meteorite dials personally. So, okay. And yeah, so I like configuration wise, like where they've got the tachometer, the way they've laid out these subdials all looks really, really good. In some ways, I like the dial a little bit better configuration wise than even the Omega, because in their instance, they hugged it, and we did this one. So they were able to keep, there are a few differences. So it depends on the model. And that's why I would like this better, is notice how they were able to pull in all of the subdials. And so all of the hour markers are the same length. They were not able to do that on the Bulova. Now, full kudos to the Bulova. You've got a fatter 12 o'clock plip, like loom plop there. Then you've got the same shorter stubby size at the 3, 6, and 9. So it's very, very balanced, which I appreciate. And I'm okay with this because they're not cropping into Roman or an Arabic numeral. So I think that part makes it look pretty good. Meteorite, though, as a texture does not work for me. So I would never personally consider this watch. I would probably get one of their other pilots instead. Like this sort of reminds me of the Snoopy, like a panda or something like that. But if you're into meteorite, I do like the configuration overall that they've gone with. That's quite a priced uptick, though, for that. Wow, $1,500. I mean, compared to the Omega, it's a great deal. But so many of these other ones are sub 1,000. I clearly have not checked out. Oh, well, the Astro. Oh, now I'm looking at stuff and I'm like, I'm falling down the rabbit hole of things that are even worse pricing wise. I still always associate Bulova with very, very affordable watches. So I always get a little bit of sticker shock. But anyway, interesting watch. But no, any brand, I've never found a meteorite that really clicks for me. It's just one of those. It's interesting because carbon fiber as a case material, which reminds me of meteorite, I kind of like it in terms of how it looks on cases, but meteorite on dials, I just can't get into it. I don't know why. It's just a taste thing, I guess. Um, and Riskful Ignorance says Longines wins this pair for me, and I'm assuming that means the pair of our GMT with the Spirit Zulu Time 39 versus the Black Bay 58 GMT. So in my instance, I copped out and said this was the best GMT watch of 2024. This was the best pilot watch of 2024. I know, cheesy of me, but it's just the way it is. Speaking of cheesy, let's go on to best dive watch. Now, this one was very easy for me. In fact, this was probably the first watch I thought of when I was going ahead to put this video discussion together. So Blancpain. I've never owned a Blancpain. I don't know if I ever will. I think I still have one on a wish list somewhere, just to remind me of it, which is one of the bathyscaphs. And the reason why was until this year, bathyscaph was the only thing I could reasonably think what I was going to be able to wear long term. I mean, would the Black Bay 50 fathoms just overhang on my wrist? Maybe not. I can get away with about up to 53 millimeters lug to lug. So, but ultimately, I have found with really large dive watches, I've let all of them go. My only dive watch I still have is a Baltic Aquascaph, and it is a very vintage and modest wearing sized watch. So it's not been one of those things that I've been able to commit to. And so, but I do like the look of the 50 fathoms. The bathyscaph has some elements that I like and some elements that I don't like quite as much. This is a very distinct look. So when this was announced, it was a no-brainer on Blancpain's part because it took them forever and a day to do this. The reason why it was so shocking for those that don't really follow Blancpain is they've been doing limited edition 50 fathoms for years in 42 millimeters, for years, but they haven't done any mainline production. And so no one can get a hold of the 42 millimeter 50 fathoms because everyone buys them. And so you're stuck with getting a 55 if you weren't able to get lucky or and some of those limited started really, really high price. And speaking of dive watches, Blancpains take a dive on the secondhand market outside of those limited editions. So, I'm always perusing used watches and stuff, and you can find 50 fathoms under 10,000. You could find bathyscaphs like closer to 7, just depending on the material and stuff. So finally, anyway, I'm rambling. Finally, they were like, let's mainline it. And so they introduced a whole 42 millimeter collection this year. And so it's nice because I think it was as of like 2007 where the 50 fathoms in its 45 millimeter case has just been around. So it's been almost 20 years of this huge watch. And there's no reason why the proportions couldn't just be shrunk in and make this much more approachable. So there are a whole series of them here. Which one? The blue one there. You want the blue one or the black one? The gold one's going to be gold and it's going to be expensive. But the reason why I'm noting it is we had, I think, in terms of materials, we're talking some titanium. So I'll scroll down to the stats for you guys. Again, all of these articles are linked in the video description, so you can go and actually read them. So again, not a huge price change from what we've been seeing the 50 fathoms and 45 at. So they start around 15,000 Swiss francs. That 28,000 is going to be like that gold version, but basically these are titanium, so they're going to be light. And there are other instances of things where they've been turning out stuff with like ceramic bracelets. I almost picked that, but I just think this collection, because it's the most approachable, they're going to lose value and you're going to be able to find them in a couple of years secondhand pretty easily. I bet you next year we find them gray market pretty easily. I've not been able to go and try one of these on yet. I would like to go ahead and try one of these on. However, I have had a lot of watches. So being able to say that it's just a little over 42 millimeters in diameter, 14.2 millimeters thick. So that's thinner than like Tudor's Black Bay Pro is, or their GMT that wasn't the 58. Grade 23 titanium. I don't know what the deal is with that grade, just a different alloy configuration. 300 meters of water resistance. They preserved all of the key features of it as a dive watch. And these have always been very large wearing presence dive watches to be easy to read. If you want the vintage style, you go with a bathyscaph. That's just kind of the approach. So anyway, overall, I just think that this was a really smart release and a very long time coming from a brand that should have known better a long time ago. So I'm being a little judgmental with them because Blancpain makes a really nice watch. They're one of the better brands in the Swatch group. And we could debate all day about the authenticity of their heritage and the history and how they basically took an old name, but it's a new brand. I don't care about any of that. Everything I have heard from people who have had Blancpains have praised this watch, except its size. So finally, we have one that a lot more people can wear. This is still not a watch for small wrists, but finally, a lot more people, like people under 7-inch wrist sizes, can consider them. 6-inch, maybe not, but closer to 7, I think you'll be okay. So let me go ahead and get caught up with the chat. Scotty Pinball, welcome to the live stream, by the way, Scotty. Santa brought me a watch. I'm waiting to see if it makes your list. Well, we've only got one left, and that's integrated sports bracelet watch. So unless he brought you that, the answer is no, it didn't make the list. And Lee Lewis, welcome to the live stream, by the way. Lee, glad you can make it. I want to see the 42 millimeter in person. So do I. I do not live near a Blancpain dealer, and when I was down in the Dallas area, this had not yet come out last I was there. So I might get a chance to see it here in a few months, but we'll have to see. Lee continues. I agree. I'm waiting on the 42 to get close to 10K. They're all above 15K right now. Yeah, it's not been out long enough yet, but I'm pretty sure it will. I mean, here's my guess. Joma Shop, where does Joma Shop typically place the 45 millimeter? I'm going to say those are closer to like the 10 to 12 range, but so I will expect this to get to that level gray and then used. I think we'll start seeing them at around 10, a little under 10. But as more models come out and stuff, that'll also help, because there'll be some people that maybe bought this that will then be like, oh, I would rather have had the one with the cool ceramic bracelet. So they go and they get the ceramic version, and the process rinses and repeats, and they go ahead and change things up, which is great for someone like me who I'm still nervous about ceramic. I would really like to experience ceramic, but not in a, like, I keep thinking I should buy a Rado and just like, I want to try a ceramic bracelet and stuff out, but I still have a concern that I'm going to break it. And I've heard of people who watch this channel have said they've broken their Rados. But I'm curious about the materials, because the only ceramic I've ever had in a watch is the bezel insert. That's it. So just not something I've had a good experience. I had a chance to experience. I've had titanium before, though, so I know this will wear really light. And I'd be open to it. The one thing with titanium that frustrates a lot of people is the ease in which it often scratches unless you coat it, like how Citizen coats theirs. But they're all trade-offs. And I got rid of my Omega Seamaster 300M because, in part, it's bulkiness on bracelet. And so titanium, especially titanium on a titanium bracelet, that would be very, very interesting. I think there was these photos I don't believe showed anything with titanium bracelets on there, but I want to think that there was a write-up about, also available on a grade 23 titanium bracelet. So they just didn't have photos when Monochrome shot these or received these as part of the press kit. But they do have it available on titanium. So that's been one of the other things that's held me back on Blancpain historically, is they often don't have bracelets on the watches. And don't get me wrong, a good rubber or silicone strap is one of my favorite things to wear a dive watch on. But I often like to have bracelets too. And it's always just been frustrating to me. And in fact, that's probably why I never did buy the Bathy scaffs I was watching, because they didn't come on bracelets. Arthur, welcome to the live stream. Merry Christmas, mate. Regularly enjoying watching your vids on here. Well, I appreciate that, and glad you were able to make it. I don't usually stream at this time, but I took off the rest of this week, and I took off all of next week. So I figured I already have a topic planned for Saturday's live stream. So I saw Monochrome was doing a best of like 2024 dive watches, 2024 pilot watches on it. I could do that. I have my own list, and with a diverse assortment of, though a lot of these are probably on their list, if not all of them, because they picked all the major stuff. They picked multiple. They cheated. I didn't cheat. Well, okay, I did cheat. I cheated with the GMT and the Pilot Watch, but I feel justified in that cheating. So Scotty mentioned that he got a watch, and he wanted to know if it made my list. It had to be a watch that came out in 2024, Scotty. I don't know if that was the case or not. My last watch is the integrated sports watch lineup. And I thought about this watch, but I didn't buy it. I bought a different version from the same brand, and that is Parmigiani Fleurier, their Tonda PF. the micro rotor model that has gotten them so much success. They had the GMT version, they have the Rattrapante version. Those are the two main ones that people have been talking about. This line has only been out since 2021. I have one of the gray dial ones with the date at the 6 o'clock position. But in 2024, what was their iterative change that they did? They came out with a no date version. It was already a very well balanced watch, but there's so much about the Parmigiani that I like that for me, again, this was a relatively easy pick. I think there was a new flavor of the Igeneur, and I like the look of the Igeneur, but I'm still really pissy about the pricing that IWC ended up doing with that. I think Gerard Perregaux had a model that looked all right. I'm not a big Laureato fan inherently. I know Chopek has turned out several other Antarctiques, but it's getting to the point where I can't tell them apart. But this, in so many ways, with this sort of gold color dial that they did, you have the same barleycorn that they laser etch onto the dial, which looks really, really good under a loop. And obviously, it actually plays pretty well with the light in terms of how it diffuses it. You have your usual really, really simple touches. It's a stainless steel watch. The bezel's actually platinum, and it doesn't even have a date to distract from it. But this colorway works really, really well. Brown is often a very hard color to pull off. And I think that's why they went so goldish with this, but it's still very, very understated. The other thing is these micro rotor watches, because they are micro rotors, as you would probably expect them to have, are a great deal of thinness. So this watch I was hoping to see, and I went with a blog to watch for my pull up, and they never summarize the stats in an easy to find place. So sometimes you get lucky and they're all in one paragraph. So this is 40 millimeters. That's another thing to note. They've had a no date out for a long time, but it's in 36. It's another gray dial. And so, unfortunately, 36 and an integrated, it's probably a good choice for a lot of people, but instinctively, there is often a concern. It just depends how long those, before the wrist let me rephrase that, before the lugs turn down for the wrist is a question. So, for example, 36 millimeter for me is great for a Tissot PRX because I had like the 40 or 41 and it wore pretty big. But with the Tonda and how the teardrop lugs work, the 40 millimeter wears pretty well, in my opinion. But this is only 7.8 millimeters thick also, and it's still 100 meters water resistant, screw down crown. So it's one of those, like, if you're into something that you just kind of like what would we call it? A gotta watch, right? Go anywhere, do anything style watch. These are really nice. They're elegant. They're very elegant in an understated way. So they go well with suits and jackets. They're super thin, so your sleeve is never going to be in the way. But they offer all the robust refinements that you would want, like the screw down crown, the 100 meters of water resistance, aside from the bezel, which no one's going to know it's platinum. The watch is stainless steel. So it's a steel watch, so it's going to hold up in that regard. Sapphire crystal, excellent movement, decoration and such. So there's something to really appreciate, but most people won't know what's on your wrist with it either. So given all of that, it's just, I think, a really, really good watch. I like mine a lot. It's probably my favorite sports watch that I have. And these, like when we were talking about Blancpain, these are going to lose a lot of value and you will be able to find them used at a decent price. In fact, they already trade less used than they do new. These are very expensive new. They're like they're 25,300, but you can find these well under, I think I'm trying to remember this model. Last time I think I saw it was at European Watch Company a couple months ago, and it was under 17, I believe. So again, no, it's not a cheap watch in any regard, but I think it's a very, very nice looking watch. And so because of that, I just thought of the integrated bracelet watches, it was my favorite to come out this year. All right, let's see. All right, clicked on yours, Arthur. You've asked a follow-up question. Did you cover the SBGX 355? I did not, so we'll have to pull it up. My first Grand Seiko and 37 millimeters is perfect for my 6.5 inch wrist. Yes, 37 millimeter. I have a 6.75 inch wrist, so I often am lurking in similar sizing. I'll stretch up to about a 52 lug to lug on a sports watch, but generally, especially in more dressy watches, I like to stay in that range, that kind of 37 to 39 is my preferred dress watch range. In sports watches, I'll go up to about a 41 usually, unless it's like, I mean, we're talking something that's meant to wear big. Again, like that, like the 50 fathoms, a 42.3, 42 to 43. I'm okay with that for like a big old dive watch, trying to be all chunky and chunky. So let us go ahead and pull up what Arthur has mentioned, which is the SBGX 355 Heritage Collection watch. No, I did not. So this is one of their high accuracy quartz. I have never owned a high accuracy quartz watch from Seiko. I have a high accuracy quartz from Citizen. The Heritage line, though, is broadly speaking my favorite collection from Grand Seiko. I did have a spring drive, one of their early models. It was a 39 millimeter. I don't remember they don't make it anymore. But it's the one with that champagne dial. They still do the champagne dial. They have a new model, and there's one in the quartz line, but that also has that dial configuration. But anyway, so this one, so titanium, 37 millimeters, 44.6 lug to lug, so very modest sized watch, 10.6 millimeters thick, which is that's a decent size on the thickness. Again, that this is quartz and not spring drive is probably helping with that. One of my problems that I didn't problems a strong word. One of the things I didn't love about the spring drive I had was I felt the watch was a bit big still. It was more the bracelet than anything that alienated me. But so Grand Seiko's 9F62 is a plus or minus 10 second per year watch. One of the nice things, though, about their high accuracy movements is they have I don't think it's actually called like the regulator, but there's a part on it where a watchmaker can actually go and make fine adjustments to the accuracy. Like the Citizen high accuracy quartz doesn't have that. You have to send it back to Citizen. So that's one of the downsides to the Citizen high accuracy quartz, at least the one that I got. Now, the one that I have is a plus or minus 5 second per year, but that's only if you don't let it go into its power conservation status. So basically, you have to wear the watch a lot. So mine does go into that status. So I am not guaranteed that level. So it's just one of those interesting things. But the world of high accuracy quartz is a very interesting one. Longines used to play in that space. You can find some models used. I don't think they make any anymore. Grand Seiko is probably the best known in high accuracy quartz at this point. Citizen is doing a lot of moves in that space, and there's some others in the vintage market that you can explore as well. But yeah, it's interesting that I would like to see more brands play around with high accuracy quartz, but I think there are only a few companies at this point that are willing to invest the money in the R&D to develop the movements and try and pull it off. But when it's so much easier to pull a Casio G-Shock and just allow it to radio sync or Bluetooth sync and kind of get that. But I think it's really, really cool. So anyway, overall, yeah, I think this looks really nice. The dial reminds me of the Snowflake. I've never owned a Snowflake though, so but that's what it kind of reminds me of. So anyway, very, very cool watch. Trap Vision, welcome to the live stream. Happy holidays to you. I caught part of your stream earlier today, I believe, but it was right when you were getting ready to sign off. But anyway, I don't normally stream at night, but I have on occasion when the mood suits me. So anyway, I had just wanted to go ahead and give some thoughts on what I felt were the kind of best of 2024 by category. So just as a quick recap before I shut things down, unless there are other questions in the chat, this is your warning and opportunity to get those in now. I did for integrated sports bracelet. I ran with the new no date Tondas and the 40 millimeter, the Parmigiani Fleurier, which was probably the most expensive watch I picked today. In terms of best dive watch, I went with all the 42 millimeter, like the mass produced in the collection. If I'm going to pick one, it'll be one of the titanium ones. Blancpain finally giving the 42 millimeter sizing its just desserts and making it not just limited edition models. Long time coming on that one. Best pilot watch, I went with the Zulu Time, the Longines. They came out with the 39 millimeter in titanium. The titanium was the new change up. This line has been out for a while now, but I think its legibility is off the charts. I love the Zulu Time. I've never owned one, but I've been sorely tempted when I see things like this. And now that with it being in the titanium material, it's not the smallest watch in the world, but it's going to be very, very light in this configuration. So I like that. cheated a little bit because while I did that as best pilot watch, I did pick the crowd favorite Tudor Black Bay 58 GMT as the best GMT watch for two reasons. One, they really got it down quite a bit compared to where they were at. Up until this point, if you wanted a Tudor GMT, you had two options. You had the regular Black Bay line with its 15 millimeters of thickness, or you had to go and get the Tudor Black Bay Pro, which is not much thinner. It's like 14.7, 14.8. So if you had a big wrist, it was probably okay. If you had a smaller wrist, you probably felt like you were wearing a satellite dish on your wrist. So the 58 in its 39 millimeter diameter sizing, they got the case down to 12.8 millimeters. That is a very thin size for a GMT, Traveler GMT movement in this price bracket. So I would go ahead and denote. I went ahead and denoted that as my pick for 2024. Chronograph, not a category that I'm really particularly fond of. However, the anniversary series, First Omega and Space, is what I went with. I just thought that the way they blended with the kind of midnight blue dial, the radial brushing, the Fotina integrates very well with this colorway. I've preferred this handset, what is it, the Alpha style handset, greatly over the moon watches. I think a lot of people would disagree with me and say that the Moonwatch Professional in white would have been their 2024 pick. I think it's probably the market pick. I think it's the one that sells the best. However, this I think was a much more interesting release, fully acknowledging that the people in the list or had already bought the Ed White are maybe a little pissed that a cheap version kind of came out with the same look. But live and learn. You still have the cool movement, guys, so embrace that. And then dress watches, my favorite category overall. Germany, I went with the 37 Arabic Vintage from Moritz Grossman. Not a brand I've ever personally considered, but with the tremblage work that they've done, they didn't crop the hour markers out, so it looks like a pocket watch, but one I would like. Breguet numerals, but not Breguet hands. These are more of a Lance style handset. Very, very attractive watch. Movement is in the 3/4 plate format of the Germans. So you don't see a lot of the movement. However, it is very well brushed. And of course, you have the freehand engraving, things that you often associate with all Longenzona and Glashütte Original. Maurice Grossman does it as well, but not just on the balanced cock. They've also done it on an additional bridge that is exposed and not under 3/4 plate. Never really seriously considered getting Maurice Grossman, but I love most of what comes out of Glashütte. German watch design in the dress watch aesthetic outside of Bauhaus is some of my favorite stuff in the entire world. And so this one was a pretty simple pick for me after I was going through a lot of, pretty compelling dress watches, but there's just something about the German aesthetic that I've always been drawn to. So anyway, those were my main picks. Let me see. I see Trap Vision has shared that he favors the Tudor FXD. A lot of people are in your boat. And I've seen a lot of people mention the FXD. I would say that the Pelagos line in general, in a way, I respect it more than the Black Bay, even though aesthetically I'm more of a Black Bay person. The Black Bay is obviously really farming the vintage catalog. I think the Pelagos has a very nice aesthetic that feels quite unique. And I have to be careful because it's not like the Black Bay reminds me of anything other than a Tudor. But nonetheless, it's one of those things. However, I've never been able to get behind fixed lugs. So for me, the FXD could never be on my top list because your strap options are severely diminished. And when it comes to a dive style watch, rubber and silicone are my favorite formats, not NATOs. NATOs, I have a number of NATO straps. I very rarely use them. While I like how the straps often look, I don't like how the tails look. I don't like the thickness they had to the watch. I've got excuse after excuse after excuse. So ultimately for me, fixed lugs just kill it for me. And so the Pelagos in general, sure, I like them a lot, but not with the fixed lugs. Just can't get behind it. Arthur says, I received a Christopher Ward bracelet for Christmas in steel, which fits the 36 millimeter, the 12. I'm thinking of buying the purple frosted lavender dial watch to pair it. Do you think it's any good? I am not a Christopher Ward fan. I have heard very good things about the 12. If you hear me, I know you hear me. It's a mechanical keyboard. If you hear me typing, I'm going to load it up so that people can get a look at what you've mentioned, so they can see the colorway. I did like the purple. And I think that was one of the ones that is in the with the SW300, right? I think it's one of the better movement ones. Yeah, because it's a titanium. Uh, well, wait. You've got the bracelet in steel. Are we must be talking about the steel, the 12. Or do they have two? I don't know. So are you thinking about pairing a steel bracelet with a titanium watch? If so, I'm going to say be careful. I mean, it's not going to kill you or anything. Not that level of caution. It might not match very well. So that would be the one aspect I would ask about, unless there's a steel purple. I only knew about this in titanium though, so that's why I'm mentioning it. So is this is not the frosted? You said frosted lavender, so that's no. This is cosmic purple. I don't know these colors, guys. I'm a simple person who doesn't know weird stuff. Here, I must need to show more. I must need to show more. There's no way you picked a steel bracelet with a titanium watch. I could, okay, here we go. Here we go. All right. 36 millimeter. Sorry, I'm reading because I'm not familiar with this one. All right. So it's one of the SW200 models. Under $1,000 though. All right. Oh, yeah, I see you said I meant the 36 millimeter purple one in steel. Yeah, no. I the moment you said steel bracelet, I'm like, he's not really going to combine a titanium watch with a steel bracelet. I was going to be I'm too nice. Maybe I'm not too nice. I was going to say I'm too nice to flat out tell you on a live stream that it would be ugly, but I'd have done it in a recorded video later and said things not to do. Don't combine like grade 2 titanium cases with stainless steel watches. The colors are not going to sync very well. Yeah, no, I mean, I have to declare I would never get a purple dial. I like purple dial. I like darker purples. Like the couple of years ago, Oris had this Holstein special edition that they did. Really cool purple. For me, it's 2K State and having gone to the University of Kansas, I just, it's too wildcat looking. So I just stay away from purple. And even when I like it, it's just one of those things. So, but yeah, no, I think I've heard very good things about the 12 as an integrated sports bracelet watch in this price bracket in particular. And I stress that because at around $1,000, and you've already got the bracelet, so you'll be able to get the one on rubber for $1,000. You're very near the Tissot PRX price point. Now, I never owned the mechanical Powermatic 80 driven PRX. I had a quartz one, and it was okay. Aesthetically, it looks pretty nice. In fact, I would argue that the 12 looks a lot busier than the PRX. I have joked, if you haven't seen some of the videos before, I have joked that Christopher Ward named this the 12 because they took 12 different companies' design ethos and they just merged them all together into their own watch. Or maybe they took 11 and then they added their 12th as their own, input. But where you could go in and you can start seeing the elements that they took from the various other integrated style bracelets, watches that are out there. I think it looks way better on bracelet than it does on rubber. So in that regard, I would definitely prefer it in that format. I've never been a big fan of these integrated looks on rubber, though I bet they are very, very comfortable. This all said, the people that have owned this have said it feels very good. And for the money, it's extremely competitive. So versus the PRX, I would say, yeah, go ahead and try it and get it. And you get a fun colorway because there's nothing that I can't think of anything else that comes in this style of purple that's in the integrated space. Tissot might have one at this stage, but I just can't really. The Tissot's okay. I'm not going to say don't ever get a PRX, but I didn't love it. I got it really just to experience an integrated bracelet watch before I would decide if I wanted to spend more. And I didn't know how they'd wear and stuff. And I learned a lot about, being careful about how far out the fixed in links go and factoring in the sizing and stuff. But, the one thing I will caution you about is the SW200 automatic movement. Automatic movement works fine. I've had a number of people mention that hand winding these can be an issue. Like the movement is not a fan of hand winding. The SW300 does not have that problem. The SW200, number of people have reported that manually winding them, I guess, often damages the movement in some capacity. And I guess it's a design flaw. I don't know. So if you can keep it wound or shake it to wind it, you shouldn't have any issues. But it's one of those things that's been noted. I have not had this happen. I can't say I've ever owned an SW200. My Tudor 1926 probably still had the ETA 2824. I don't think they had transitioned over yet. And my other Solitas, I think, were slightly different numbers. Like I think I had a 202. I had like a manual wind, so there were no choices. You had to manually wind it. But yeah, overall, I think it's an interesting watch. It's not, the dial and stuff is not really my style, but I've heard good things about how they wear. So I would say, yeah, give it a go. Especially if you already got the bracelet. You're not going to have a problem selling. Christopher Ward's not a micro brand. You're not going to have a lot of people call them a micro brand. They're not. They like to engage with the community a lot of people that want their watches, but they're not really a micro brand. All that being said, that's a good thing. And the reason why it's a good thing is there's a big market for Christopher Ward. So if you hate it, you'll be able to sell it pretty easily. And I think that's worth noting. It's like, and there are micro brands like that too. Like it's not hard to sell a studio underdog. They're pretty popular at this point. There are a lot of micro brands. Unloading them is very, very difficult if you don't like them. And so I hate having things sit when, that money could go towards another watch. So that's one of the things I would point out. Trapvision says, I could go for that Longines Spirit. That is in regards to the one I picked as the best pilot watch for 2024. Longines is, if I do a video of watch brands that I like so many of their watches of yet have mysteriously never owned any, Longines would be right there. And the Spirit might be my favorite. I even like the little 5-star thing, which a lot of people are like, what's this Michelin restaurant star nonsense? They got it there, so it balances out the logo up at the top. It's really smart. It seems stupid to just stick on a bunch of stars, and then you realize, well, there's this huge old applied logo up at the 12, and it's all about counterweight. It's all about balance. So I'm not a designer, so I just thought that it's interesting why it feels so balanced to me, and that's because I'm gonna throw it back up here. It's 3-on-3, and they tier it. Longines is the longest, then the logo, and then about the length of the logo. A little bit shorter, I think, is automatic. And then you've got Zulu time, the shortest, stars, and about the same length, but a little bit longer, chronometer. It's all balanced. It's a mirror image of itself. So obviously, without actually being a literal mirror, because it doesn't say Longines logo automatic again. But you get the idea. You see what they're trying to do. It's very, very clever. It's little things like that sometimes on startups you'll notice when you look in really close. You're like, these are things that they didn't think about or they couldn't address at the time. Arthur adds, I'm not that crazy to match titanium with steel bracelet. Okay. I didn't want to be judgmental because you're participating in chat and I want to be really nice, but it's like, things are not looking so good. At the moment you see that dark gray dial and all of a sudden you go to this like mirrored stainless steel, it's gonna look weird. It's gonna look weird. Arthur adds, that's funny as they literally stole Chopek's head designer as well. Yes. And so in part that some of it's probably a little bit true, but of course the Chopek gonna Chopek. The guy from Chopek, you're gonna expect him to have stuff that looks a lot like Chopek. And that's the thing. When this came out, my and a lot of people's reactions were this looks a lot like the Antarctique. However, there are some notable other differences from that. But when you look at them, you start to realize those other differences look like they're straight up out of some other integrated sports watches. But that being said, it's probably good when you look at it, you aren't immediately saying, oh, this is supposed to be the blank. Like there's a brand, I don't remember the brand, maybe it's Vinciano or someone. They have like almost a straight up Parmigiani PF micro rotor clone, like straight up clone. And we've seen others that are just straight up doing the Nautilus case shape and stuff. So it's nice that they've got even if they took them from other people, that they've mishmashed a number of elements. Here's my analogy. My analogy would be the Chopard Alpine Eagle. So the Alpine Eagle, when you look at it head on, you might immediately first think about the Royal Oak because of the bezel. However, the dial and the texture and the eagle eye look is not like anything else. And so while you might immediately think Royal Oak, that's just like a snap decision thing. Any time spent looking at a watch, you're not going to think it's the Royal Oak. It's the same with the 12. any time spent looking at the 12 beyond that instantaneous initial reaction of like, is that an Antarctique? Within a second, you're gonna be like, wait, no, it's not an Antarctique. What is it? Or maybe and you'll be like, oh, it's a 12. Yeah, that's right. It's a 12. So just one of those interesting things. Trapfish says, I'm a fan of the PRX, and the new carbon might be a hit once they get a handle on stocking them. I did not know that they were having supply issues on the carbon. That one, had I not already tried a PRX, carbon's one of those materials I'd like to try, and they're often quite, it's used in a number of affordable watches. So I've thought about getting a carbon watch just to experience it. Some luxury brands are even using carbon. I don't know. Here's my concern, and why I wouldn't want to spend a lot on carbon is I have heard some people that have owned carbon for a few years where there's been delamination and such. And so I'm a little curious about it, but I'm more not curious. I mean, I don't know if it would, if that's only conditions that cause delamination. Earlier models had bad blends that they didn't know what they were doing, et cetera, et cetera. I will not get a dive watch in carbon, however, because I mean, I can't help it. After what that submersible that imploded going down to the Titanic, which was made up of what, carbon fiber, I was like, I'm not sure I want that material for my dive watches either. Doesn't seem like it was any smarter for that as it was to make a submersible out of it. But what do I know? I am not an underwater aquatics engineer. Joe Bolt, welcome to the live stream. Hi, everyone. Surprise Christmas gift, getting a second live this week. Yes, that's true. Because this is technically the first live this week. No, you're right. No, you're not right. Because the last one was last week, but there will be a second one. So Saturday, I am going to actually do 3 watch. I'm going to focus on 3. We'll see what the live chat suggests. But I want to focus on 3 watch blunders of 2024. That I've picked that I think are noteworthy. And I only did 3 because 2 of them I think are going to be a decent discussion points, and I think they're going to go a ways. So Trap Vision asks, do you think Longines is an affordable alternative to Tudor? Yes and no. It depends. So it depends on the model. So case in point is our discussion on these GMT watches, GMT and Pilot watches. So with this Black Bay, what was the pricing when they dropped it? 4,300 on bracelet, Swiss francs, mind you, 4,100 on rubber. And Swiss francs it's about the same US, right? So it's pretty close. Longines, I think it's around that same. Actually, Longines around that same price point. I wanted to think it was around 4,500 or so US, mind you. 4,300, 4,275 US. So they're basically the same price. You get about the same power reserve out of both. 72 hours on the Longines. I think it's a 70 on the Black Bay, but I'm not positive. 65, a little bit less. But this is a 4 hertz movement, so it's going to beat faster anyway. And this is a 3 hertz or 3.5 hertz, excuse me. So yeah, it's a lot of what Longines has in the catalog is less than Tudor, but it depends on what Tudor you want, and it depends on what complication. So in a way, it's complicated. So because Tudor, the cheapest Tudor you can readily get new is most likely, that I know of at least, is the 1926. They're still entirely using Bosch movements in the 1926. I've heard Sellita based. I've heard ETA based. I thought it was ETA based and then went Sellita based. And then I heard some people say they were actually still using ETA. I don't really care. Tudor tunes them and adds some of their own stuff to them. I did have a 1926. They're very, again, you only get the 38 hours of power reserve, but it was a really nice watch and it was under 10 millimeters thick. How much are they? Tudor brands them at about $2,000. Joma shop, you can gray market them around $1,600. You want to get them used, you can get them closer to $1,000. Longines, you can go to Joma shop and you get some of their dive watches with third-party movements in them for under $1,000. But the more complications you start to get, the higher up the price bracket Longines starts to go. At this stage, Longines and Tudor on their new stuff are about the same price, generally speaking. Here's what I think the differences are. I think with Longines, they're really not using in-house movements. You'll have in-house branding on them, but it's very modular. So you tend to get a lot of stuff that gets a lot of thickness pretty quick because they're basically taking Editech, giving it a Longines makeover, and they're sticking them on top of each other. So you tend to get a lot of thickness with them that Tudor's not a slim brand. I mean, you can just look over and see like every version of a Tudor, the equivalent of Rolex is always thinner. But you don't seem to experience that same level of kind of modular thickness as you start piling on the complications out of Tudor in their in-house line, given that's the direction they've been going. That said, at the price point, I seem to you're getting grade 5 titaniums out of Longines at the price you're getting grade 2 out of Tudor. So if you want like polishing and stuff, you're giving up all of that out of Tudor, and you can get a more luxurious looking watch out of Longines. But Tudor tends to lean more into looking at it as a tool watch in most of those instances. So, long story short, do I think they're an affordable alternative to Tudor? Yes, I do. However, some of their best stuff is at the same price. So it really just depends on what you're after. I would describe it. I would rephrase my reply would be a little bit different than what your question was, which is I would just say I think Longines is an alternative to Tudor. I think that's what Longines wants to be, and I think they've positioned themselves very well to do that. And they have a very robust catalog. So the one thing I would say is there's more variety, I feel, in the Longines line. In Tudor, everyone's after two things: black bays and pelagos. Pelagi. I don't know the plural of pelagi. We're going to call it pelagi. They're after dive watches. Tudor is a dive watch company. Do they make things aside from dive watches? Absolutely. But they're not popular. With Longines, you've got popular dive watches, you've got popular pilot watches, you've got popular dress watches. Is it as popular of a brand as Tudor? Perhaps not. But I feel like they have very well established lines in multiple styles of watches. So it's easy to find something that you would love in Longines catalog somewhere. In Tudor, I mean, maybe if you remember that there's a Tudor Royal out there, if you remember there's a 1926 as their kind of version of the date just, maybe that's got something for you. Tudor doesn't seem to have anything like pilot style. They just stick to GMT complications on dive watches. I don't care about their chronographs in any way. Longines isn't exactly a chronograph company in my mind either, because again, the modules, they get thick pretty quick, but I tend to think they look better. So, but that said, I've not owned any Longines. I probably should to make such statements. I've owned a couple Tudors before, but I don't own any anymore. So just one of those things, I suppose. But those are my thoughts. Arthur said, I took the bezel off of my IFL Post Malone hand-painted limited edition watermelon GA 2100 Cassiope, catchy name, I know, hopefully I said it all right, to expose the carbon case. Overpriced as heck, but pretty interesting piece. Oh, cool. Well, I have not taken the bezel off of any of my watches, except I'm trying to think if I ever adjusted one. No, I had someone tell me how to adjust a bezel at one point when I had an offset bezel. Or I asked about an offset bezel, and they said you could reinstall it yourself if you needed to. And Trap Version says, thanks. I like getting different viewpoints. So do I. That's why I like watching other channels that have I love different perspectives. I don't want to just hear my opinion. I want to hear other people's opinions. But that is going to be it for this live stream. Surprise live stream. I ended up putting it together about 30 minutes before I went live. So those of you who tuned in live, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed yourself. Those of you watching a recording, go ahead in the comment section and say what you think were the best watches of 2024. I do go back and read those. I find them interesting. And that's pretty much it. If you want to read about the watches that I talked about today, there is a link to every article about every watch I mentioned. So you can go and I used Monochrome, a blog to watch, Time and Tide, and Hodinkee, depending on the watch. So anyway, that is it for this live stream. I will be back on Saturday for another live stream talking about blunders of 2024. So that one will be a little more snarky than this one was. But take care, everybody, and have a great evening or whatever time of day it is where you are.